One morning, Akihito is in his classroom feeling confident about the mediocre year ahead. All he needs to complete it is an ordinary teacher. Suddenly, the door moves and Hiyori, his homeroom teacher, enters with blood dripping from her forehead. Akihito and his classmates all look at her with concern. Because of this incident, rumors begin to spread that she can curse students. They nickname her the Kowakowa teacher because of that. One student even claims to have seen her notebook filled with talismans, and another claims to have heard her muttering curses to herself. Akihito ends the day feeling uneasy about having such a scary teacher. As he is about to leave the school, he spots Hiyori inside an empty classroom reciting odd lines. He keeps himself hidden as he observes Hiyori telling the stuffed animals on the desks that she will begin class now. He thinks Hiyori is using the dolls as practice dummies to cast curses on. However, to his surprise, she really just starts acting as if she were an ordinary teacher, pretending to go back and forth with her stuffed toys. Akihito is baffled by the sight since he had assumed she was going to perform a curse. Somewhere in the middle of her practice session, she realizes that her voice is too soft, so she begins rubbing her belly and doing breathing exercises. But then she starts unbuttoning her top so she can feel her stomach expand better. However, the more Akihito observes, the more it seems she is doing a different kind of breathing exercise, not the one meant for vocal practice. She also gets tired from breathing alone, leaving her flustered. Akihito finds himself getting flustered as well since she looks adorable. Hiyori starts sitting down, but Akihito suddenly runs toward her because she is about to fall after moving the chair earlier. This ends with Akihito breaking her fall. Once she is decent, Hiyori explains to Akihito that she gets stage fright and is clumsy, but she has always dreamed of becoming a teacher. She is self-aware of her weakness, so after becoming a homeroom teacher, she decided to work harder by practicing. She eventually explains that she tripped earlier that morning and hit her head, which shocked everyone in class. Akihito then realizes that was why she was bleeding earlier. He then pulls out her notebook to check her schedule, and Akihito notices that the talismans the students saw are actually just her notes written on sticky paper. One of the papers falls and she accidentally trips on it. She mutters an apology and Akihito notices that she jumbles her words, making them sound like a curse. He realizes that the nickname Kowakowa does not suit her, but Yowa seems more appropriate. He decides not to involve himself too much and begins moving out of the classroom. Hiyori thanks him by clinging to his arm so he can hear her properly. The action makes him blush and realize that he has fallen for Hiyori. On another occasion, while cleaning the school, Akihito spots Hiyori exercising in the courtyard. He notices she is wearing a school jersey, but it looks too tight on her. He then realizes it might have been her high school tracksuit. To hype herself up, she loudly announces that she will now begin special training and pulls out a jump rope. When she begins, she ends up hitting herself with the rope by accident. In the end, she cannot get a single jump in and just ends up in a tangled mess. She decides to take a break, but then trips because of the skipping rope wrapped around her feet. Akihito dives forward to catch her, but the sudden movement causes part of the jumpsuit to unzip, leaving Hiyori in a flustered state. Later, she explains that her school is having a jump rope competition in October, and she does not want to disappoint her class, so she's been training on her own. Akihito thinks it is too early since it is only April, but he suggests that she should start with basic strength training first. She explains that she tried that before, but her neighbors complained because she kept making strange noises while exercising. Akihito assumes it is the weird, curse-like muttering that the neighbors heard. Yuri suddenly suggests that Akihito help her, and before he realizes it, he finds himself assisting her with sit-ups. However, Yuri struggles to sit up and make strange noises while exercising. Akihito finds himself getting flustered and begins thinking of topics to talk about so he can distract himself. He ends up awkwardly asking her what her ideal type is. Hiyori misinterprets the question and ends up answering what kind of teacher she wants to become. As he listens, Akihito cannot help but feel like she is striving to be the complete opposite of her current self. He watches her closely and finally understands the strange noises the neighbors were complaining about. On a rainy day, Akihito thinks about how the school views Hiyori as a scary teacher. He remembers seeing a student run away from her after noticing that she had written someone's name several times in her notebook. He did not know how to explain that it was Hiyori's unusual way of memorizing names. He enters a bookstore and notices Hiyori reading a book, so he quickly hides himself to observe her from a distance. He notices that she is crying and tries to get a closer look at the page she is reading, but it turns out she is only reading the author's note. To his surprise, she places the book into her basket, and he notices that she has chosen several self-help titles. The sight makes him feel a little sorry for her. When she gets in line at the counter, she begins fumbling with her wallet, making Akihito think she might have forgotten to check how much money she has left. When her eyes begin to tremble, Akihito starts to worry that she might be struggling financially. However, after a moment, she suddenly brightens up, making him feel relieved that she has enough money. When she finally reaches the counter, the cashier tells her that she needs another 5 yen to purchase a bag, which immediately makes Hiyori tear up. Akihito watches in silence, realizing that Hiyori only has enough money for the books themselves. Because she does not have enough, she decides to take the books without a bag, making Akihito instantly worry about how she will get home in the rain. Before she leaves, he decides to purchase a plastic bag for her. However, when he calls out to her, she accidentally slips and ends up falling forward, landing against his chest. He becomes awkward due to the sudden contact, but he still manages to offer the plastic bag to her. As soon as she carefully places the books inside the bag, a car passes by them, and water from a nearby puddle splashes onto both of them. Despite being completely drenched in water, Hiyori feels relieved and happy since her books are safely secured in the plastic bag. She removes her coat without realizing that her clothes have become see-through, forcing Akihito to be the one to point it out to her. One morning, Hiyori ends up running to school but stops briefly to greet Akihito along the way. He immediately notices that she did not button her outfit properly. Hiyori hurriedly explains that she overslept that day but needs to arrive early since homeroom is her first class and she is not finished preparing yet. As she rushes ahead, Akihito misses the chance to warn her about the missing button. He then spots her trying to greet another student, but the student becomes frightened and runs away. Akihito begins to worry about how she will handle the rest of the day since it is already starting off badly. Just as he predicted, at the start of homeroom, the entire class ends up intimidated by Hiyori's disheveled appearance and her nervous, strange muttering. He watches her and notices that her handwriting on the board looks wobbly, which instantly scares everyone in class. He also notices that her face looks flushed and tired, giving him the impression that she is still exhausted from running to school that morning. Hiyori accidentally bumps into a desk, causing a box cutter to fall onto the floor. When she bends down to pick it up, her thighs end up getting stuck against the desk. To the students, it looks like she is preparing to harm someone with the cutter. However, Akihito knows that she does not even have the ability to hurt a fly, so he is certain there must be a reasonable explanation for why she is still on the ground. He decides to distract everyone by suddenly announcing that he wants to be the class president. He steps forwards in the front of the classroom while quietly agonizing over his decision, since he had originally hoped to remain an ordinary student and avoid standing out. When he glances back at Hiyori, he notices that her tights are caught on a loose nail by the desk. She quietly begs him to help her. His eyes drift to the rest of her, and he notices that some articles of clothing are missing. Hiyori embarrassingly admits that she overslept and forgot to put them on. He panics, unsure of how to deal with the situation. Helping her might draw attention, but after Hiyori begs again, he decides to carefully unhook her tights from the nail. The sudden movement causes the material to snap free, hitting her in the process. To cover it up, she quickly stands up and announces that she will continue homeroom. After class, as Akihito cleans the board, a student teasingly calls him president, making him feel immediate regret for volunteering. He tries to convince himself that he only did it to help Hiyori. As he returns to his seat, he notices a note on top of his desk. He thinks it is a death threat, but it turns out to be from Hiyori, asking him to meet her after class to discuss his responsibilities. Later, Hiyori speaks to him using a megaphone so that she can be heard clearly. Akihito questions it, and she explains that her attention was called earlier by another teacher. They were concerned that she might not be able to teach properly due to her soft voice, which led her to the idea of using a megaphone. To demonstrate, she tries speaking through it, but her words still come out jumbled. Akihito tries to encourage her, saying that people are likely only scared of her because they cannot understand what she is saying. Hiyori pales, apparently unaware of how she has been perceived by the students this whole time. She then realizes that it must be the reason why no student has ever looked her directly in the eyes. Suddenly, she notices that Akihito is not scared of her at all, which feels strange to her since he was never particularly assertive before. Yet now he is speaking to her normally and even volunteered to become class president. She feels inspired by his ability to change because she thinks he is doing it for self-improvement. Akihito suggests that it might be better for her to practice speaking more slowly and enunciating her words clearly. Hiyori then tries repeating tongue twisters while using the megaphone. When he confirms that she sounds better, she moves to the front and repeats the tongue twister again to check if Akihito can hear her from the back. She becomes delighted when Akihito confirms once more and begins to feel confident that her students might not be afraid of her anymore. She asks if her feelings are reaching him, and Akihito says yes, though he cannot help but feel like they are inside a strange dramatic scene. When she thanks him, he feels his heart race, confirming to himself that he has truly fallen for her. She continues thanking him, but in the process, the megaphone slips out of her hands. Akihito panics, believing it to be important for her growth, so he dives to catch it. However, Hiyori also moves at the same time, causing him to end up underneath her as they both try to grab it. As he speaks to check if she is okay, he accidentally presses against the megaphone, causing it to vibrate and making Hiyori react in surprise. Eventually, they begin walking through the halls, and Akihito tells her that they can always discuss class responsibilities another time. Hiyori beams at him, believing that he is also working hard to improve himself. In truth, he's only doing all of this to support her. One day, Hiyori ends up being a special guest during a PE class. Students whisper their displeasure, which makes Akihito realize they are misunderstanding her. Akihito cannot help but feel a little worried due to how bad Hiyori is at sports. The PE teacher decides that a good start would be testing grip strength, so she calls Akihito to be Hiyori's partner. The first step is measuring grip strength using a device. Hiyori tries to hold on as firmly as possible, but her posture causes her chest to tighten awkwardly. Akihito quickly corrects her and suddenly feels thankful that her partner is not another male student. They proceed to the next exercise, which is side-to-side jumps. After that comes handball, but she can barely grip the ball. Next is a 30-meter dash, which she also performs terribly at. By the end of it, Hiyori is completely exhausted. The PE teacher then announces that they will perform standing long jumps. This time, instead of Akihito, Hiyori gets paired with Mizuki. Mizuki is Akihito's popular female classmate. He also notes that she is very athletic and has breezed through most of the earlier exercises. Akihito feels himself grow nervous as the two prepare to face each other. Meanwhile, Mizuki feels a rush of excitement since people are focusing on her. Once they are told to begin, Mizuki confidently jumps forward and lands at 5 meters. She turns to see how Hiyori performed, only to find her collapse near the starting line. Akihito pales as he recalls that Hiyori had been blown back by the wind from Mizuki's powerful jump. Hiyori tries to sit up abruptly, startling Mizuki before fainting again. Hiyori is brought to the infirmary, where she is instructed to rest. When the doctor steps out, she asks Akihito to stay behind for a while. When Akihito approaches Hiyori, she immediately apologizes for fainting. Akihito assumes she must be upset, but she tells him that she is actually very happy to have been able to experience PE class together with her students. Hiyori suddenly leans against his chest, the contact making Akihito extremely nervous. Eventually, he manages to get her to bed. The next day, a female classmate approaches Mizuki for help because she believes Hiyori might curse her. Mizuki confidently declares that she will handle the situation herself since she is the strongest student in the class. During a dark and stormy day, she decides to search for Hiyori. She eventually finds Hiyori and Akihito inside a classroom, stitching up a doll together. However, the scene frightens her because it looks like they are preparing to curse someone. She also notices that Hiyori has blood on her finger, making Mizuki believe that she has stumbled into some kind of ritual, which makes her tremble. Hiyori recognizes her as one of her students, and Akihito comments that they were caught in a bad situation. Hiyori starts to panic. The situation is completely innocent, as she was only trying to practice teaching. She noticed that one of her dolls had a tear and tried to fix it, which caused her to prick her finger. She wants to clear up the misunderstanding, but her words come out jumbled, which only makes Mizuki more terrified. Mizuki begins to fear that the rumors about Hiyori wanting to rule the class and dominate the world are true. Hiyori tries once more to explain herself, but Mizuki refuses to listen, which breaks Hiyori's heart. Akihito steps forward to explain, but Mizuki refuses to hear anything from him because she believes he is brainwashed. Apparently, there are rumors circulating that he has become Hiyori's pawn. These rumors began when he volunteered to become class president, which was completely out of character for him. Mizuki finally declares that she has seen enough and punches a hole in the wall. She boldly states that even if she is afraid, she will protect the school. As she prepares to take a fighting stance, Akihito desperately tries to think of a way to save the situation. He tells Hiyori to run while he distracts Mizuki, but Hiyori instead looks at Mizuki with wide, starry eyes. This reaction is enough to stun even Mizuki. Hiyori suddenly declares that Mizuki's courage is admirable and that she has always thought of Mizuki as an amazing student. She then tries again to explain that everything is just a misunderstanding, but as she steps forward, she trips over the leg of a chair and falls on top of Akihito, who then falls on top of Mizuki. They scramble apart and Hiyori repeatedly apologizes. However, she suddenly begins to feel dizzy from the small amount of blood she lost earlier. Mizuki observes Hiyori more carefully and begins to realize that Hiyori is truly weak-willed and fragile. When Hiyori apologizes to Akihito again, Mizuki suddenly misinterprets the situation and assumes that Akihito is the one taking advantage of Hiyori and deserves punishment. Akihito desperately begs Hiyori to explain everything properly, but she is too exhausted. The next day, Mizuki walks in on them again in another awkward position and immediately accuses them of behaving improperly. Akihito hurriedly tries to explain that Hiyori simply tripped, but Mizuki refuses to believe him. She questions why Akihito is still in school, and Akihito weakly explains that he is only fulfilling his duties as class president. Mizuki then admits that she was actually looking for Hiyori. She takes Hiyori's hands and sincerely apologizes for her behavior the previous day. She confesses that she used to believe all the rumors, but now she understands that Hiyori is simply doing her best to teach her students. Mizuki then asks if she can call Hiyori by her first name. Akihito feels that she might be asking too much since using first names is usually reserved for close friends. However, Hiyori looks deeply touched by the request and happily agrees. She becomes so emotional that tears begin to fall as she confesses that it has always been her dream to become a teacher who could be friends with her students. Overcome with emotion, Mizuki gently hugs her, unable to understand why she ever thought Hiyori was scary when she is actually so adorable. Akihito watches the scene in amazement, surprised by how quickly their bond has grown. He feels a small pang of sadness as he notices how happy Hiyori looks with Mizuki. Suddenly, Mizuki turns to Akihito and boldly suggests that Hiyori appoint her as the class president instead. Mizuki tells Hiyori that she thinks Akihito only volunteered to be class president to take advantage of her. Akihito pales at being called out, but at the same time, he truly wants to help Hiyori. Hiyori quickly tells Mizuki that Akihito wanted to change himself, which is why he volunteered. Mizuki decides to believe them, but she still insists that Akihito step down from the role. She even claims that she can give Hiyori better advice. Hiyori begins to realize that Mizuki does have a clear and confident voice, and she decides to ask her for advice on how to speak. Mizuki uses vague explanations to describe how she does it, reminding Akihito that Mizuki tends to be an idiot outside of sports. Mizuki then decides to demonstrate what she means. She suddenly shouts out the window, which immediately earns her a scolding from Akihito. Hiyori becomes impressed, thinking that if she could reach that kind of volume, she might even be able to teach outdoors. Akihito tries to convince her that it is a bad idea, but Hiyori tries to shout out the window as well. However, her voice is completely swallowed by the wind. Mizuki assumes that her clothes might be restricting her, so she tries to loosen Hiyori's skirt, but the fabric suddenly rips apart, leaving everyone embarrassed. Mizuki immediately apologizes, and Hiyori tries to comfort her by saying that she often tears her own clothes too because they get caught on things. Mizuki assumes that Hiyori is trying to make her feel better, so she suddenly tears her own skirt as well, claiming she wants to experience the same humiliation. Akihito removes his pants and hands them to Hiyori, saying she can wear them temporarily while he goes to get his gym clothes for Mizuki. Mizuki is stunned by his action and finally admits defeat, realizing that Akihito is willing to sacrifice his own dignity for Hiyori's sake. Akihito attempts to ease the awkward atmosphere, but then Hiyori suddenly giggles and remarks that the three of them together make an interesting group, which earns her odd looks. After the incident, Mizuki begins joining them during their after-school training sessions, which makes Akihito sad since he loses his private time with Hiyori. He then decides to study English so he can impress her by improving his grades. His older sister, Akemi, suddenly enters the room to praise him, which shocks him. Akemi offers to clean his room and even asks if he wants lunch, but Akihito refuses all her offers, insisting that Akemi take the day to rest. Akemi becomes emotional and begins to cry, saying that he has grown so much. Akihito complains that the reason for his independence is simply their age gap, and he explains that he does not want to rely on Akemi for everything. She then shows him a pair of baby socks that he used to wear and proudly claims that she still brings them to work, much to Akihito's embarrassment. After that, she settles down in his room and asks how he has been doing in school, since she noticed that he has been putting in more effort lately. He explains that his homeroom teacher is a bit unusual, and because of her, going to school has become more enjoyable. Akemi smiles warmly, but then she complains that she desperately wants someone to dote on. Meanwhile, at Hiyori's home, she washes away the stress of the day. She reflects on the past month and how she has finally achieved her dream of becoming a teacher, despite needing to improve. Still, she feels grateful as she is a caring student like Akihito. Back at Akihito's house, the doorbell suddenly rings and Akemi stands up to answer it. Akihito hears some commotion near the entrance and decides to check what is going on, only to find Hiyori lying on Akemi's lap. After they settle down properly, Akemi is shocked to discover that Hiyori is actually Akihito's homeroom teacher. Hiyori came over to greet them because she recently moved next door, but Akemi mistakenly thought she was a young girl and had invited her to lie on her lap. Akihito's heart flutters when he learns that Hiyori has moved in right next door. Hiyori promises that she will move out. She explains that since she struggles to wake up early, she decided to live closer to the school, but she never expected her neighbor to be Akihito. Akihito quickly tries to convince her not to move away. Akemi immediately steps in and begins doting on Hiyori, reminding her that Akihito already said it was fine, so she should continue living next door. They sit down together to have tea, and Akemi begins asking whether Hiyori has been eating properly. Hiyori tries to lie about her diet, but Akemi easily sees through it and manages to get the truth out of her. After learning that Hiyori mostly survives on convenience store lunchboxes, Akemi warmly invites her to have meals with them instead. Hiyori hesitates, but Akemi firmly insists because she wants to take care of Hiyori. She then tells Akihito to return to his room. Akemi explains that Hiyori might feel self-conscious with a student nearby, so if she wants to properly take care of her, Akihito needs to give them some space. He reluctantly returns to his room, convincing himself that this arrangement might actually be a good thing. However, he suddenly worries that this situation might backfire and make Hiyori too dependent on his sister, so he quickly heads back to the living room. To his shock, he finds Akemi and Hiyori in an unexpected situation. Akemi calmly explains that Hiyori accidentally spilled her drink, so she was simply about to help her take a bath. She then gets a sudden idea and suggests that Akihito join them. Hiyori does not think that is a good idea, but she struggles to voice her objection because Akemi keeps insisting that Akihito is still like a baby. Eventually, persuaded by Akemi's reasoning, Hiyori shyly invites Akihito to join them as well. Akihito immediately refuses and slams the door shut behind him. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.